Am I the a-hole for quitting my job over unreasonable demands? I had always prided myself on being a dedicated employee, a dependable team member who would go the extra mile for the company I loved. But everything changed when new management took over our department, and their unreasonable demands began to erode the very essence of my work ethic. It started with minor adjustments to our schedules and escalated to expectations that defied all boundaries of work-life balance. I watched in dismay as colleagues, once full of vigor, succumbed to stress and burnout. For years, our company had fostered a culture of mutual respect, where every employee felt valued and heard. Our leaders encouraged innovation, allowing us to explore creative solutions without fear of reprisal. However, the new regime seemed to have a different vision entirely. They believed that long hours and unyielding dedication were the only keys to success, regardless of the personal toll on the workforce. Mandatory overtime became the norm, and messages arrived at all hours demanding immediate attention. I could feel my own enthusiasm draining away as the relentless pressure mounted. I tried to voice my concerns during meetings, suggesting that a healthy work-life balance would boost productivity and improve employee morale. My proposals were met with cold stares and curt dismissals. I was told that my ideas were naive and that in a competitive market there was no room for softness. The turning point came when I was assigned a critical project that required 70-hour work weeks, with promises of recognition that felt hollow. I realized I was being treated as a mere cog in an unfeeling machine. After many sleepless nights and heartfelt conversations with close friends, I decided to tender my resignation. I drafted my letter with a heavy heart, aware that leaving meant forsaking the security and familiarity of a job I once cherished. My decision was met with shock and outrage by some colleagues, who labeled me a traitor for abandoning the team in a time of crisis. They argued that my departure would only worsen the situation, leaving the remaining staff to bear an even heavier burden. Others, however, quietly admired my courage, understanding that no one should sacrifice their well-being for an unsustainable work culture. The fallout was swift. Social media erupted with heated debates about work ethics and personal sacrifice. Some hailed me as a hero for standing up to a tyrannical system, while others condemned me for what they perceived as a selfish escape from responsibility. I found myself at the center of an intense public discourse, where every comment and opinion felt like a verdict on my character. It was both isolating and, in a way, liberating. Now, as I navigate the uncertain waters of unemployment, I am determined to rebuild my life on my own terms. I have begun seeking opportunities that prioritize employee health and sustainable practices, convinced that true success should never come at the expense of personal happiness. I know the road ahead will be challenging, but I am prepared to face it with resilience and hope. I stand firm in my belief that no job is worth sacrificing one's humanity, and I urge others to consider their own well-being over blind loyalty to oppressive systems. So, dear readers, I ask you, am I the asshole for quitting my job in the face of unreasonable demands? Or was my decision a necessary stand for self-respect and a healthier life? Your judgment, I realize, is as much a reflection of your own experiences as it is a comment on my choice. In the end, I only wish to live a life where I am valued not just as a worker, but as a person with dreams, desires, and a right to peace. Am I the a-hole for refusing to host the annual family reunion? I never imagined that a single decision could ignite a wildfire of family drama that would divide everyone I love. For years, our annual family reunion had been a symbol of unity, a time when we all gathered under one roof to reminisce, laugh, and create memories. However, as our family evolved, so did our expectations, and what was once a joyful tradition slowly morphed into a battleground of conflicting personalities and unresolved grievances. Last year, I made a choice that many of my relatives have condemned, and now I find myself questioning, am I the asshole for refusing to host this year's reunion at my home? The tension had been simmering for months. My cousin Lydia, who had organized the reunion for the past several years, imposed strict rules on every aspect of the event, from seating arrangements to the menu. She believed that tradition meant doing things her way, dismissing any suggestions that could be seen as modern or progressive. Her iron-fisted approach left little room for compromise, and it alienated many family members who wanted to honor our past while embracing change. I had repeatedly tried to propose a more inclusive plan, one that respected our heritage, but also allowed for new ideas. Yet every attempt was met with derision. The breaking point came during a phone conversation 2 weeks before the reunion. Lydia demanded that I help enforce her rules when I was well aware that several relatives planned to challenge them. When I suggested a compromise, a blend of old customs with a few fresh twists, she accused me of undermining her authority and belittling our traditions. In that heated moment, emotions overflowed, and I voiced my frustration, questioning whether our adherence to outdated customs was worth the constant strife. I told her that our family deserved better than a rigid script that left no room for genuine connection. Although I immediately regretted my harsh words, the damage was done. On the day of the reunion, I made the difficult decision to stay away. I feared that my presence would only intensify the tension and force family members to choose sides. When word of my absence spread, it sparked outrage among those who believed that, as the eldest sibling and a longtime pillar of our family, I had a responsibility to support the event. Some called me cold and unfeeling, while others suggested that I was using the situation as an excuse to avoid confrontation. My aunt, who has always been the mediator in our family, tried to defend my choice by saying that my absence might help diffuse a volatile atmosphere, but not everyone was convinced. In the days following the reunion, I was bombarded with messages and phone calls from relatives both angry and sympathetic. Several of my cousins expressed their disappointment, saying that my refusal to attend was a betrayal of our shared history. Meanwhile, a few of the more open-minded members of our family reached out to say that they understood my need to preserve my own mental health in a situation that had become increasingly toxic. Their words, although few, gave me the strength to stand by my decision. I realized that sometimes protecting one's well-being means challenging long-held traditions, even if that means ruffling a few feathers. As I reflect on the aftermath, I see that my decision has sparked an important conversation about how we define family unity. Instead of passively accepting outdated customs, maybe it's time we consider a future where every voice is heard and respected. I am not naive enough to believe that my choice will immediately mend broken bonds or heal old wounds, but I do hope that it will serve as a catalyst for change. Our family is imperfect, and we have long ignored the growing need to adapt to new realities. By choosing not to host the reunion in an atmosphere charged with unresolved conflict, I am advocating for a space where we can all come together without the weight of unrealistic expectations. I ask you, dear readers, for your honest judgment. Am I the asshole for refusing to host the reunion, or is my decision a necessary stand for a healthier, more inclusive future for our family? I am prepared to face the consequences of my actions, even if it means being ostracized by those who cling to the past. Ultimately, I believe that true family is not about maintaining traditions at all costs, but about evolving together, even if that process is messy and fraught with difficult choices. Am I the a-hole for canceling my friend's surprise party? I never imagined that what began as a loving gesture could spiral into a web of misunderstandings and resentment. It all started when my friend Jenna excitedly announced her upcoming birthday. Jenna has always been the vibrant heart of our group, and naturally everyone was eager to celebrate her special day. Wanting to honor her, I took it upon myself to plan a surprise party that I hoped would capture her effervescent spirit. I spent weeks meticulously coordinating with our mutual friends, planning every detail from the quirky decorations to the playlist of her favorite songs, and even booking a venue that I thought perfectly reflected her unique personality. The idea of a surprise celebration had always resonated with me as a genuine expression of admiration and care. I envisioned an unforgettable night where every attendee could bask in the warmth of our friendship and joy. However, just days before the event, I learned that Jenna had been grappling with some serious personal issues. Unbeknownst to most of she was dealing with a difficult family situation and a deep sense of isolation that she had kept hidden. Though she never fully disclosed the extent of her struggles, I began to worry that an elaborate surprise might overwhelm her during such a vulnerable time, conflicted between the excitement of the planned party and the need to protect her fragile emotional state. I decided to seek the advice of a close mutual friend who knew Jenna well. In that conversation, I discovered that Jenna had subtly mentioned preferring a quiet, low-key celebration rather than the boisterous event we were planning. Torn between my desire to surprise her and the responsibility I felt to care for her well-being, I made the gut-wrenching decision to cancel the surprise party altogether. I sent a heartfelt apology message to everyone involved, explaining that circumstances had changed and that it would be kinder to respect what I believed were Jenna's true wishes. The fallout was immediate and intense. Many friends were furious, accusing me of overstepping my bounds by assuming I knew what was best for Jenna without consulting her directly. Heated messages flooded in, with some calling my actions selfish and short-sighted. They argued that the party was meant to be a celebration of Jenna, and that my unilateral decision robbed her of an experience that could have brought us all closer together. Others defended my decision, insisting that prioritizing her mental health over a pre-planned extravaganza was an act of compassion, not betrayal. As the debate raged on, I found myself caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. On one side, I felt deep regret for having disrupted what was meant to be a joyful celebration. On the other, I was relieved that I had the courage to honor what I believed were Jenna's unspoken wishes. The situation forced me to confront a difficult truth. Sometimes, even well-intentioned plans can go awry when they are built on assumptions. The more I pondered the issue, the clearer it became that my actions were driven by a desire to protect a friend in need, even if it meant sacrificing a long-anticipated celebration. Desperate for clarity, I reached out to Jenna once the dust had settled. In a calm and reassuring tone, she expressed gratitude for my concern and admitted that a large, raucous party might have been too overwhelming given everything she was dealing with. Jenna explained that what she truly needed was an intimate gathering where genuine conversations could mend her spirit, not a grand spectacle that might exacerbate her emotional turmoil. Her words brought solace to my troubled heart, yet they did little to mend the rift that had formed within our friend circle. Now, I stand at a crossroads, questioning whether I made the right choice. I understand the anger of those who feel I denied Jenna the celebration she deserved, yet I firmly believe that safeguarding her mental well-being should have come first. So I ask you, dear readers, am I the asshole for cancelling the surprise party based on what I perceived as Jenna's true wishes, or did I overreact in a situation that demanded a more sensitive approach? I'm left to face the consequences of my decision, hoping that time might heal the wounds I never intended to inflict on anyone's heart. Am I the a-hole for refusing to let my parents move in? I've always prided myself on being an independent adult, building a life that reflected my own values and aspirations. Growing up, my parents were my rock. They nurtured me, supported me, and instilled in me the importance of family. But as I got older, I also learned the value of personal space, boundaries, and carving out a path uniquely my own. When my parents announced they wanted to move in with me after a series of personal setbacks, I was caught off guard. While I deeply love them, the idea of having them under my roof forever clashed with the independent life I had worked so hard to create. My home, a modest but carefully chosen apartment in a bustling part of the city, had become my sanctuary. It was a space where I could unwind after long days at work, host a few close friends, and nurture my hobbies, writing, painting, and even the occasional cooking experiment. Over time, I'd transformed it into a personal retreat that balanced comfort with a sense of order and control. The prospect of sharing that space with my parents, whose habits I'd long since outgrown, filled me with dread. I knew that their presence would inevitably lead to unwanted criticism of my decor, unsolicited advice about my lifestyle, and an erosion of the personal space that I cherished so dearly. When I first broached the topic with them, I tried to explain that my apartment wasn't designed to accommodate a second household. I mentioned that I'd invested considerable time and effort into creating an environment that allowed me to thrive independently, and that the prospect of change was overwhelming. My parents, however, interpreted my words as a lack of love or a sign that I was rejecting them. They argued that family should always stick together, especially during hard times, and that my refusal was a betrayal of the unconditional support they'd given me throughout my life. The tension escalated during a particularly emotional conversation. My father, usually so composed, became visibly upset. "We've sacrificed so much for you," he pleaded, "and now when you need to repay us with compassion, you shut the door in our faces." My mother, tearful and desperate, insisted that having us around would provide a sense of comfort and security in an unpredictable world. I tried to assure them that my decision wasn't personal. It was about maintaining the balance that allowed me to function. But the more I tried to explain, the more they saw my words as cold logic overriding love and duty. In the days following that conversation, the fallout was palpable. Close family friends began weighing in, some siding with my parents by emphasizing the sanctity of family unity, while others supported my right to preserve my personal space. Social media became a battleground of opinions, with comments ranging from "you should do this for your parents" to "boundaries are essential for mental health." Each notification felt like a fresh stab to my already bruised heart, as I struggled to reconcile the guilt of potentially hurting the people who had given me everything with the necessity of protecting my own well-being. I spent sleepless nights questioning whether I was being selfish or if I was simply standing up for my right to live life on my own terms. I considered alternative solutions, perhaps a compromise where my parents could visit more frequently without moving in permanently, or exploring nearby assisted living options that would offer them a degree of independence while still ensuring they were cared for. But every potential solution seemed to invalidate my need for personal autonomy, a core part of who I had become after years of striving to be my own person. After much soul-searching, I remained firm in my decision. I reached out to a trusted counselor, whose insights helped me see that setting boundaries does not equate to a lack of love. In our sessions, I learned that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, and that sometimes tough choices must be made to preserve one's mental and emotional health. I also began to draft a list of alternative living arrangements for my parents, one that respected their need for family connection while also acknowledging my limits. Now, I stand at a crossroads, grappling with the aftermath of my decision. While I've received support from many who understand the importance of personal space, I've also faced criticism and heartbreak from those who see this as a failure of filial duty. I'm left wondering if my choice to protect my independence has doomed my relationship with the people who raised me, or if it will eventually lead to a more honest and respectful dynamic in our family. In sharing my story, I ask, am I the asshole for refusing to let my parents move in? Or is this a necessary stand for preserving my own identity and well-being? I'm aware that family bonds are invaluable, yet I also believe that self-care and boundaries are crucial for any healthy relationship. Every decision in life comes with consequences, and while I cannot predict what the future holds, I remain committed to forging a path that honors both my past and my need for independence. As I continue to navigate this delicate balance, I hope that my parents and I can eventually find common ground, a place where love is expressed not through sacrifice of oneself, but through the mutual understanding of each other's needs and limitations. I stand by my decision, even as the echoes of their disappointment haunt me, believing that true familial love should empower, not confine, the individuals it binds. In the end, I only wish for a future where my parents understand that my refusal is not an act of defiance, but a necessary step toward building a life where both our needs can be met without compromise. I ask you, dear readers, to judge my actions. Am I the asshole, or have I simply drawn a line in the sand in defense of my own well-being? Am I the a-hole for missing my best friend's wedding due to a family feud? I never imagined that a decision rooted in a deep-seated family conflict could cost me one of the most important days of my life. For as long as I can remember, a simmering feud between my cousin and me had cast a long shadow over family gatherings. What began as a petty argument in our teens grew into years of silent resentment and bitter misunderstandings. Despite numerous attempts by other relatives to bridge the gap, the tension persisted. leaving me caught in an unending tug-of-war between loyalty and self-preservation. When my best friend Alex asked me to be his best man, I was overjoyed and honored. His wedding was to be a celebration of love and unity, a day when all differences would be set aside. I had envisioned standing by his side, laughing and sharing in the joy of a new beginning. However, as the wedding date approached, an urgent family crisis erupted. My parents, determined to force a reconciliation between my cousin and me, organized an emergency family meeting on the eve of the wedding. They believed that this long overdue confrontation was the only way to finally mend our fractured relationship. I was torn apart. On one side was the commitment to Alex, a commitment I had cherished and looked forward to for years. On the other was the pressure from my family to address wounds that had festered for decades. The meeting, initially meant to be a healing exercise, quickly devolved into a maelstrom of accusations and raw emotions. Voices were raised, past grievances were dredged up, and the atmosphere became unbearably charged with anger and sorrow. In that moment, I realized that attempting to be present at both the wedding and the family meeting would only mean splitting myself in two, leaving neither role honored nor my own feelings respected. After hours of painful confrontation, I made the excruciating decision to forgo the wedding. I informed Alex with a heavy heart, explaining that the overwhelming family crisis demanded my full attention, even though it meant missing what could have been one of the happiest days of my life. His reaction was one of shock and deep hurt. Many in our circle of friends and family accused me of choosing dysfunctional obligations over a celebration of love and friendship. Social media buzzed with comments and heated debates, with some calling my actions selfish and others sympathizing with the impossible choice I had been forced to make. In the lonely hours that followed, I wrestled with guilt and regret. I reached out to a trusted friend who had navigated similar familial storms, and her compassionate words helped me see that some conflicts are too deeply rooted to be resolved by a single confrontation. I began to understand that my decision was not a betrayal of Alex, but rather a painful acknowledgement of the reality that some wounds require time and professional help to heal. The weight of my absence from the wedding still haunts me, as does the knowledge that I might have lost a chance to support my best friend on his special day. As days turned into weeks, the rift within my family only seemed to widen. Attempts at reconciliation between my cousin and me resulted in more bitterness, and every conversation about the wedding reopened old scars. I tried to explain my actions to Alex, expressing my remorse and promising to be there for him in other ways, but the shadow of that day continues to cast doubt over our friendship. I now find myself at a crossroads, questioning whether the price of forcing a resolution was too high, and whether my choice, painful as it was inevitable in the face of relentless family strife. I share my story with you, dear readers, in the hope that you might understand the impossible situation I was thrust into. Am I the asshole for missing my best friend's wedding because I was forced to confront a lifetime of family conflict, or was I simply a victim of circumstances beyond my control? I long for healing, both within my family and within myself, even as I bear the consequences of decisions made in the midst of overwhelming turmoil. In these trying moments, I am determined to seek professional guidance to help mend the broken ties that have long defined my family. I continue to grapple with the reality that every choice comes with its own set of painful repercussions, and that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that push us toward eventual growth and understanding. May my story resonate with those caught between the pull of duty and the need for self-care, and remind us all that sometimes the path to healing is as treacherous as it is necessary. Am I the a-hole for asking people to stop speaking about the US so much at a dinner with expats? I'm a South African living in the Netherlands. The other evening I was at dinner at someone's home with a group of expats, 3 from the US, 1 from Brazil, 1 from Serbia, and 2 from Italy. I only knew the Brazilian and 1 of the Americans. The rest of the people were all new to me. I asked questions to try get to know everyone better. When the Americans entered the conversation, the subject would switch to the US and stay on the US. I remembered a moment where the rest of the table sat in silence while the Americans spoke amongst themselves about really specific things about their states. They were not sitting next to each other at the table. I left the table a few times to go help the host in the kitchen. It was an opportunity to speak about other things. I would go outside and have a nice chat with one of the guests that smoked. Back at the table, I waited for a gap to speak. One of the Americans was telling us about how you can get fined in some state if you hit a deer with your car. I stepped in and said, "I notice I'm getting frustrated. We are speaking about the US a lot, but there are many guests here who I know little about, and I'd like to know them better. I'd like to propose that we speak less about the US and rather be more curious about each other here and now." I saw positive reactions from people. The Americans apologized, but two of them that I only met that day remained quiet for the rest of the evening, only speaking briefly when someone asked them a question. The next day, my friend told me that those two Americans were offended by my request because they felt singled out while others were still allowed to speak about their own countries. Am I the a-hole for sending my niece back home after lying multiple times and smoking in my home? My husband and I were asked if our teenage niece could come live with us for a few months. We said yes, and clearly stated what our rules would be. We don't allow minors to use drugs, alcohol, nicotine, and no one is allowed to smoke in our home. Smoking marijuana and vapes is something we know our niece has been doing and my sister-in-law was aware of. For the first few months, everything went, well, she was never a problem, and we loved having her here, planning fun things and taking her shopping. 3 weeks ago, we noticed a sudden change. She was avoiding us, and we were catching whiffs of a weed pen. We started being hyper-aware of her behavior, and within a few days noticed she was clearly high. We confronted her, and she told us the truth and handed over the pen. Fast forward a few weeks later, and we find out she's been smoking vapes in her room the whole time she's been here. When confronted, she lies. We have her multiple opportunities to tell the truth, and she continued to lie. Finally, after taking away her privileges to her phone, gaming system, and iPad, and getting very stern with her, she hands over the vape. When we talked to sister-in-law about it, she wasn't on the same page with us, and ultimately gave my husband, her brother, a lecture. My husband and I decided that the best course of action was for our niece to return home, which is ultimately what she wanted. BC, we live a few hours away from the rest of the family and all her friends. We were very clear about our rules and what would happen if trust was lost. My niece now hates me, even though this was a decision that both my husband and I made, and he has been the one who leads confronting her each time. I stepped in at the end of the conversation because the lies were absurd and enough was enough. We didn't have any legal guardianship of this child, and ultimately felt that this was the best course of action to not damage our relationship with my sister-in-law and Dice, but now I'm worried that it made it worse and maybe we should have just dealt with it. Am I the a-hole for refusing to keep sending money for my partner's family? 29 Mia. I'm in a relationship with my partner, 28 M, who comes from a culture where parents are seen as infallible and can ask for anything without question. When we decided to move to another country, my partner's parents generously helped fund the move. Over time, we managed to pay them back, and even more than what they initially contributed. My partner's mother regularly asks for money for things like bills, office trips, or even luxury items like a new iPhone. This started as small, occasional requests, but it's been ongoing for 3 years now. I initially managed to convince myself how it's fine, and a little sum won't hurt, but lately it's really wearing me down. For context, we've also covered other expenses like paying for legal fees for my partner's dad when he got into trouble, sending money for birthdays, and even paying for my partner's brother's migration fees, which ended up being a waste of money. Not to mention money for chemo. His mom had cancer but is fine now. And random funds being sent for their afternoon tea. I've tried talking to my partner multiple times about setting boundaries with his family. I've explained that this constant financial support is draining, and that if we continue like this, his dreams of buying a new car or a house won't be possible. He kept telling me he has dreams, which I sometimes hate when it turns into a rant, how the cost of living has been getting worse. I've suggested he have a conversation with his mum to set some limits on how often they ask for money. However, he refuses to do this and says that I'm in the wrong that we should separate our finances. Aita for refusing to keep sending money to his family.